Hi, this is Tom from Troy Historic Village. This is Digger the Groundhog, and we're here to tell you about our new program called Digger's Detectives. And our second one is on October 9th, Saturday at 10 a.m. This is our executive director at Troy Historic Village, Miss Jen Peters, and I brought her here today to ask her some questions about how we observe an object. And this is very similar to what we ask the kids to do when they come for Digger's Detectives. And Miss Jen, I know that you studied historic preservation and museum studies and anthropology.
Right,
in
all
college.
together, yeah.
So you're very knowledgeable about objects and antiques.
I know some things, but I also sometimes use some resources and ask some people who know a little bit more than I do. So I think we can work through these questions, though.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so these are the questions that we work on at Digger's Detectives. Questions we ask when observing artifacts. And Digger's a little shy, so she asked me to ask you these questions.
Okay, yes.
And as we go through this object, Miss Jen's going to show you the proper way to observe an artifact and to figure out how to tell the story of that object.
Right, so first we want to remember that if we visit a museum, you're not supposed to touch the artifacts because they're not yours. And your hands might have some oil or dirt, things that you don't know is even on there, and we don't want to destroy the objects by touching them. Now, if it's your object at home, you should wash your hands before you pick it up and look at it, so you're not getting dirt on it, but you can pick it up and look at it. And if what we did today is we wanted to look at this object, so I talked to our curator, and she said, you know, if you could put some gloves on, that would help protect it. So I have some white cotton gloves. That's sometimes what we use in museums. All right, so what are your questions? What are we going to look at?
So when we first start with an object, the very first thing is, what do you think it's made from?
Well, that's a good question. I'm looking at this and it looks like wood. I'm not an expert about wood, but it's definitely wood.
I'd
but
agree with that.
I also see some pieces that are probably metal. So around the edge here to help that wheel last longer, and then some of these hinges and things look like they're made of metal too. So we'll stick with wood and metal. We know at least that much.
Very good detective work. Is it heavy or light?
Ooh, I think I'm going to be very careful. It feels kind of heavy.
Yeah.
It's on wheels, so that makes it easy to move, but it's a heavier object. It's not something I would just pick up and carry around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does the object have any special colors?
It looks pretty plain. You know, sometimes you have a chair or something that's painted. This one isn't painted. It does have some carving in the top, and so that might be something. We look at that compared to some other chairs that we have. That might tell us how old it is based on what the decoration looks like, because people decorated things in different ways in different years.
That's one of our other questions, is does it have special markings or letters, numbers? I don't see any numbers.
Right, and I brought with me, sometimes it helps if you have a flashlight, if you're looking all around. And I did look at this earlier. I looked underneath to see if there was a name anyplace. We also brought a magnifying glass with us because sometimes it's really small what's written. And I didn't see any other names or things like that, but yeah, the decorative carving is the one thing that we have on this one.
Okay, and it asks about smells, but I don't think it has any special smells.
I don't think it has. We could, no.
Just smells old.
Just smells old, yep.
Is it damaged or worn in any way? For instance, like cracked, broken, or rusted?
Right, it does look worn, like it's been used, and especially on this, what we like to show people is that this is where you probably put your feet, right? So we can, at this point, we can say, you know what? This looks like a wheelchair. I think somebody sat in it. I think they could have leaned back in it. And here where they put their feet, it looks like this side is worn more than that side. So I would think about that, and I would think, well, maybe this leg didn't work very well, so it just sat there all the time. And maybe this leg did work, so maybe if you were leaning or pushing, you'd wear out that side a little bit more. So that might tell us about the person who used this. So it looks like it was definitely used by somebody.
And more on one side than the other.
And more on one side than on the other, yes.
Oh. And does it look like it has any missing pieces?
Well, it doesn't look like missing pieces to me, but we might bring in a new resource for that. We have an old Sears catalog. And this is like the Amazon back in 1800s and 1900s. It had all sorts of things you could buy. This is a great resource for people in museums, and we like to look up some of these objects. We can tell a lot of stuff by looking it up. So in here, we have almost the exact same wheelchair. And we also have a couple different types of wheelchair. So we can compare those. We can see what pieces we have or don't have. And one thing I noticed when I looked at this is that this wheelchair has these added hand pieces. Not all the wheelchairs do, and that catalog shows that you had to pay extra to get those. But one thing that tells me, Mr. Tom, is that the person who sat in this wheelchair might be pushing themselves around. If you couldn't push yourself around and somebody else had to push you all the time, you probably didn't want to spend extra money on those things. So this person probably couldn't walk around very well, but had one leg that worked okay, or ish, and they probably used this chair to get themselves around quite a bit.
And this is a bigger version of what was in that catalog. This is one of the activities that we use with certain schools. We do this searching activity around this parsonage. I see some notes in here in the advertisement. It says the framework is of oak, so we know it was wood from an oak tree.
That's the kind of oak, the wood it was.
Very good. Yeah. And it was fitted with an open cane, which is cool and elastic, practically never wears out.
Yeah, it's in pretty good shape, yeah.
It said it had a reclining attachment, like you said.
Right.
So that was another question, is does it have any parts that move or make sounds? So we found the moving parts, the wheels and the recliner on the hinge. And it says all the different dimensions. It's 29 inches high, 19 by 17 inches for the seat, and so on. So it gives us a little bit more information. And you see the price was $13.75 back in 1902.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, so one other thing that we sometimes get with an object is we know who used it. And you can look up some things about that person. Maybe it's somebody related to you. You can ask your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa if they remember that person and how they use the object. So that might be another way to investigate things that you can do at home.
And the last thing that we could talk about is, does this object remind you of anything you've seen before?
Well, we already talked about it a little bit. It sure looks like a wheelchair to me. But when we looked in the book, it's kind of funny. They called it an invalid chair. So we don't use the same words that they used in the catalog. But I see these a lot of times at hospitals. And sometimes people have them in their own home too. There's lots of different kinds of wheelchairs. There's special wheelchairs if you're in races, if you like to go fast, if you like to play basketball, they modify the wheelchairs. So this would be a good thing that if you come to the village and you look at this wheelchair a little bit and you start to look at other wheelchairs that you see in other places, how is that different or the same? How has it changed in 100 years? Because they really have the same basic functions, but you might notice something that I didn't notice.
Yeah, we do a lot with the school kids and with families that come. We do a lot with the before and after, or the then and now.
Right.
We compare things, and that's what we do at Digger's Detectives. And sometimes at Digger's Detectives, you'll have mysterious objects that even grown-ups might not recognize, and so it's about solving that mystery. But in this case, sometimes we'll have objects where you know what it is, but you still want to tell the story of the object, and that's what Miss Jen did for us today.
We dig a little deeper. Right?
Yeah, that's a good way to finish. Let's dig deep with Digger.
All right.
So feel free to check out more about Digger's Detectives on our website, troyhistoricvillage.org. See you soon.